Thank you, Brad. We say good morning now to Victoria Churchill, commentator with the Young Voices organization. President Trump making lots of news this week. One of the biggest items he was talking about, Victoria, was the new executive order targeting flag burning, which oddly is drawing criticism even from conservatives. What's going on with all that?
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me on. Always great to be back on with you guys. It's really interesting for a number of reasons. So, of course, President Trump's executive order, he loves to make news with these. And this most recent one targeting flag burning, it's interesting because flag burning has, by the Supreme Court, previously been delivered as a protected form of speech. And so, there's two kind of moments with this. First of all, there's how people personally feel about it, which I think, if you poll the majority of Americans, they would say that it's absolutely abhorrent to desecrate a symbol of America like this. But then also, constitutional conservatives love to protect the Constitution. And so to them, barring anything changing at the Supreme Court level, flag burning has been decided as protected form of speech, regardless of how abhorrent it is. And so that this is a really interesting moment because President Trump's executive orders, I'm sure, as we've already seen throughout his term, have been challenged in court. And some of his decisions have already gone to the Supreme Court. And so this is actually something that I believe may stay because this, of course, even as is noted in the executive order, this is, part of the Texas v. Johnson case. And people, want to stand by what the Supreme Court decides. Now, of course, there have been already precedent with President Trump's executive orders or just even actions under the Trump administration forcing the Supreme Court to make a different decision. For example, pro-life legislation or pro-life, decisions, not even legislation. That is, of course, a perfect example of that, where there was a 50-year precedent by Roe v. Wade. And then, of course, it was overturned just a few years ago. So, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But, I think there's definitely a sect of folks on the conservative right that say, regardless of how abhorrent they may find your speech, they're going to defend your right to say it because that is protected under the First Amendment.
Well, this is one of those type of issues that's a very emotional issue. We had this battle back in the late 80s, early 90s, flag burning, and that's when the Supreme Court made these decisions. So that it's coming up again, it just goes to show you what's new is actually old and what's old is actually new.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it is interesting that I think kind of each generation wants to face this and wants to bring up these issues and figure out whether decisions that have been made in the past are right to be carried on into the future or whether they can be revisited. And again, kind of as I brought up the Roe v. Wade decision, that was really a generational decision that has had ongoing effects for, decades until it was overturned. And so, if this does end up going to the Supreme Court, I can definitely see this potentially being overturned, especially with the current majority of the court.
Victoria Churchill with Young Voices. Victoria, thanks for coming on. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.